The purpose of this video is to look at different things and different ways that you can set yourself up for success as you start to invest time in your learning. So we want to make sure that you know what it is that you're aiming for. So take a minute and consider, what do you think of, or what do you see when you think of a successful student? I'm going to share my thoughts on the next slide, but just take a minute and kind of think about people through your experiences when maybe you were in school, elementary school or high school, and just think of what was a good student, who was a good student, and what kind of things did they do. So when I think about a good student or a strong student, I think of someone who is always showing up to class. They don't find excuses on why they don't need to go. Maybe the notes were posted online, but they still know that there is another learning opportunity that could be had by attending class. So a good student is going to look for those learning opportunities. If there were some practice questions that were assigned, the student would go through and try all the questions. Even if they were fairly confident with their abilities, they would still practice and practice to try to get those skills so that they could be very confident. Another thing would be that they take the time to look at their feedback. So a good student, instead of just saying, oh, I got 60% on the test, what they would do is they'd say, okay, I got 60% on a test, which means I knew what, and what is it that I can still learn? What are things that I can still improve on? And take all of those opportunities to gain even more knowledge. Another characteristic that comes to my mind when I think of a strong learner or a strong student is someone who is actively engaging their brain. So if you see two students in class, one of them is kind of leaned back scrolling through their phone, and the other one is sitting up, have their pens and paper out, and are paying attention, you have a good idea that the one that's paying attention is going to be a stronger student than the one who's flicking on their phone. They have strategies in place that they actively learn, and they make sure that when they're in class, they're present in that moment. They're actually in class. They're not distracted by all of the other things that are going on. So they're able to focus. Another thing that comes to mind when I think of a strong student is someone who has the courage to ask a question. A lot of times we can be fearful of other people and what they think. And if we're asking a question, we are admitting something. We are admitting that there is something that we don't understand. But that's okay. That's part of learning. That's part of looking for those opportunities. So when I think of a strong student, I think of someone who has the courage to ask questions. And these behaviors that we talked about, attending class, asking questions, practicing material, reviewing material, looking for learning opportunities, these are all different behaviors that I associate with a strong student or a good student. And what I know is that these behaviors were habits that were practiced over and over again, that it almost seems like strong learners just have it natural. But they've taken the time to build these learning habits. And that's what we're going to be looking at in the following slides, is we're going to be looking at how can we develop habits for learning. One of the great benefits of habits is that once a habit is formed, it takes a lot less energy to do whatever behavior goes along with that habit. The problem is when we are trying to choose our habit instead of accidentally gaining a habit, it takes a lot of intentionality and a lot more energy at the beginning. However, it will save us time and energy in the long run, so it is well worth the effort to develop a new habit. In order to develop a habit that we want, we need to know how habits are developed to begin with. The first part of a habit is the cue itself. So a cue is something that is felt with your senses that is going to cause you to want to do or think of this behavior. So when I was a smoker, one of the things that was a cue for me would be the morning coffee. I got up in the morning, I grabbed my coffee cup, started pouring my coffee, and my brain automatically went to, it's time for a cigarette. Some people have cravings and habits connected to their phone. So their cue could be waking up first thing in the morning. They wake up first thing in the morning, they look over, immediately grab their phone. So in that case, the cue would just be waking up. The craving is the next step, and it is a force that's actually going to push us forward to whatever the behavior was. So in the case of the cigarette, one of the forces, or with the craving force, would be that I knew if I had a cigarette, I would have a relief. With a phone, the craving might be tied to the fact that you might have this fear of missing out, so you want to make sure that you didn't miss anything. So you have this strong desire to check your phone and to see what's happened while you were sleeping. The tricky thing with a craving is that as soon as that happens, as soon as you start to have that craving, your body actually is going to release dopamine. And it's a feel-good chemical that happens right after the cue, but before the actual behavior. So this craving is very, very strong, and it is the motivating force. And next we have the behavior itself. So in the case of smoking, it would be actually going and lighting up your cigarette. In the case of the craving for your phone, it would be starting to scroll on social media. And the more that we repeat our behaviors, the more that we may identify with that behavior. For example, I absolutely considered myself a smoker. I identified with that particular behavior. And finally, we have the reward that's associated with the behavior. So in the case of smoking, I was very happy when I had my cigarette because I had that relaxation. In the case of scrolling on your phone and social media, you might find a joke, you might find a little tidbit of information that rewards your behavior. And that reward is going to help form the cravings that will motivate it to happen again and again. So now that we know how a habit is formed, we can use the fact that we naturally are going to form habits, except take a little bit of extra effort and steer them in the direction that we want ourselves to be. We want to steer them so that the behaviors are going to be the identity that we're hoping for. So according to James Clear, he's the author of Atomic Habits, one of the most important things that you have to work on is creating an identity that you want. So your identity is built on actions or behaviors that you repeat over and over again. And our identity is always evolving. I do not identify myself as a smoker anymore because I'm not a smoker. I don't identify myself as a child anymore because I'm no longer a child. So this will continue to evolve, and it can do it randomly, or we can make choices and do it purposefully. So they say step 1 is to decide on the person you want to be, and step 2 is to prove to yourself that you are that person with the small wins that you get. So every time you do a behavior that aligns with that identity you want, that's a victory, that's a small win. So in this case, we're looking at how can we identify as a learner or a good student. So we know a good student attends class. That means each time that you walk in our classroom, you're being a good student. They study outside of class. So each time you choose to study at home, that's another vote for being a good student. They complete their assignments on time. So each time you complete an assignment, that's another vote for your identity as a good student. And they ask questions when they're stuck. So once again, each time you come up and ask a question, that's a celebration because that's another vote for being a good student. You can think of all the other things that a good student would do, and then every single time you do that, you're proving to yourself that you are a good student. So with the identity of a successful student, we're going to take those steps to build habits of a student. And according to the rules of Atomic Habits, the first step is to make it obvious. Then we're going to make it attractive, you're going to make it easy, and you're going to make it satisfying. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to set ourselves up some cues that are obvious. My favorite thing is alarms. I have an alarm for when I wake up in the morning. I have an alarm for when my coffee's done. I have an alarm for when I need to walk out the door in 10 minutes, and then another alarm that says I actually should be walking out the door. I find them to be a very, very useful tool. Another thing that helps for cues, it doesn't have to be a sound, it can actually be a space. So for example, if you set yourself up a study area, mine when I was at home, it was a table and a chair. It doesn't have to be fancy, but I'd go into my room, I'd pull out my TV tray, I'd pull out my folding chair, and I would know that that is my cue to start studying. And the more I did this, the faster and more efficiently I got into study mode. Another really good rule that was from Atomic Habits was never miss twice rule. If you miss one day of class, well, life happens, but don't let yourself miss another. If you schedule yourself for 2 classes each week and maintain this philosophy of never miss twice, you know you're going to stay in good standing with our program. So cravings will not happen immediately. They're going to come as you continually repeat the behavior and receive rewards that actually make you crave learning. And I know it sounds a little bit strange, but as I've been a student for over 20 years, I still constantly am learning, and I crave finding new information. I love it. If there's something that I don't know and I have to go search for it, it is something that can be developed. So I know it sounds crazy, but you can learn to crave learning. In the meantime, you can actually practice something that they refer to as habit stacking. So, for example, if you want to typically wake up and you automatically check social media, but you know you need to get in the habit of checking the D2L newsfeed, what you can do is use this formula. You can say, after I wake up, I will check D2L. After I check D2L, I will check social media. So having this habit stacking is a way that can help you to crave the results that you want. Another example could be if coming into the classroom itself, maybe it's something that seems undesirable or not a habit you want to build. You could do something like, after I get to campus, I will bring my stuff to the classroom and log in. After I log in, I'll go to Tim Hortons and get a coffee. Something along those lines, but things that you can do, you might have to be creative, but you can do different things to try to make it more attractive to do those things that will help you in your courses. The next one is make it easy. Now, learning in general is not going to be a very easy thing, especially at the beginning, but there are different things that you can do that will help. And there's different learning strategies that we can go through and discover that will make it as easy as possible. So to make it easy, as counterintuitive as it is, will actually probably take more energy at the beginning than it would at the end. So, for example, one of the things to make it easy to focus is to put your phone away. It's to make sure that if you're listening to music, you're not listening to music that has lyrics, which is going to distract you. Make it so that it's easier for you to focus and pay attention to your studies because you've removed other barriers, you've removed other distractions. Another thing for reading would be actively read. So let's compare that to what you would do if you were reading things on Facebook or reading a newspaper article. You can go through and scroll through, and if you missed half of it, doesn't really matter. But if you're learning and you missed half of the content in your lesson, you're going to find that it's very frustrating and very difficult to continue on. So you want to make sure that you're actively reading, which means you're going to read a bit and then stop and make sure that you understand it. You can do that by paraphrasing. So that's taking somebody else's ideas and putting it in your own words. You can also make notes and create summaries. If you have a summary, you don't have to go back and review the entire lesson. You only have to review the part that you've summarized. And these different strategies will help you build that foundation of knowledge, which then you can continue to build on. The other thing you want to do is to make sure that you're asking questions as you go. Check with yourself. Make sure that you're understanding. I can't tell you how many times I have read through a research paper and I got through an entire page and I stopped and went, I didn't actually read that. So I had to go back and read it again. And like I said, it seems counterintuitive because I'm now reading it again, but it actually makes learning a whole lot easier. So now we're going to talk about the rewards, and you have to learn to reward the little things and acknowledge those small wins as you're developing new habits. So if you have 20 practice problems in math, try 1 or 2. If you get them right, celebrate, and then try a couple more. If you check them and they're not right, that's okay. Take a second, review the lesson again, and see if you can get it right the second time. If you figured it out, celebrate. If you don't, that's okay. have the courage to come up and ask your teacher for some advice, because then you're putting a vote in for the identity of a strong student. So once again, that's another reason to celebrate. And after the teacher explains it to you, you now have this new knowledge that you can build other things on. So once again, another reason to celebrate. Some people prefer to make more of a tangible goal, a tangible reward, but just make sure it's aligned with your goal. So if, for example, I said, if I do work hard on my first study block that I've scheduled for myself, then the second one I'm going to skip. That'll be my reward. Well, that's not helping you become a good student. So you don't want to do that. You want to do something that would go towards your goals. So if, for example, you want to be a good student, one of the things is your brain needs a break. So maybe you'll have a nice hot shower or hot bath before you go to bed, because it'll help you relax and you can get a good night's sleep. It's very important to note that what is punished is avoided. So you want to make sure that you're avoiding punishing yourself while you're learning. So if you're studying at home, don't focus on what you couldn't get. Make a note and use that as cravings for when you want to go to class. You want to find that answer, so you're going to use that to help you get motivated to go into class next. Focus on what you learned and celebrate what you have learned. If you spend time beating yourself up about not being on time or about not doing this right and all sorts of things like that that are negative, it is going to make it very unpleasant for you to want to go into the next study session. So make sure that you're making it attractive, you're making it as easy as possible, and you're making it a rewarding experience. Long story short, you're gonna form habits. It's a natural part of being a human. We're gonna form habits because it reduces the amount of energy that we need to complete a task. The question is, will you choose the habits you want to form and develop those behaviors to become what you want to become, or will you let your habits and behaviors define you?